Oh, sure. How's everybody doing? With regards to 9/11 Truth Tuesdays, for the past 6 months, I've been privileged to take part in, we're showing 9/11 Truth movies. Sorry, I have an expired subscription. We've been showing 9/11 Truth movies every Tuesday at a mainstream movie theater, the Anthony Wayne Movie Theater. And all of that was possible because of Betsy Metz, who is in the audience. Please stand up, Betsy. All right. She's a little shy, but all of that was possible because of her, and I thank her very much for letting me participate in that. A few announcements. There are bottles or cans outside for donations for the Feel Good Foundation for the 9/11 first responders. A lot of them are sick and dying, and the government is ignoring them. So please, if you can, give a little bit. Just yesterday, there was a story released that said the feds are now blocking the funding to help the citizens, not the responders, the people who lived around Ground Zero who are getting sick. They now decided to block that funding as well. So I was going to try to do this by holding this, but it's awkward. I want you guys to listen to what I have to say, and please remember the feelings that you get. I want you to remember the anger that we feel from everything that's going on in this world in our name. The anger that we feel towards what's happening in this country and the direction that we're headed. The anger that we feel when we see the smug expressions of the powers that be making decisions that no longer benefit us, but benefit the 1% of this country and this world. The anger that we feel when we know we were lied to about 9/11 and that elements of our government were complicit in the attacks. The anger that we feel when we think about the fact that there are elected officials in government today who know the truth and don't speak it. The anger that we feel when we think about how the media is well aware of the deception and they don't bother to cover it. I want you to please think about that anger and please focus on it until it gnaws on you, and I want you to remember that anger for the end of this. Now, I wanted to play an audio clip of a radio interview that Betsy and I had done on Dom Giordano's The Big Talker, which was a CBS radio, reached 38 states. And I asked him a specific question during that interview. And I wanted to play that for you, but unfortunately we couldn't get that working. The question was, why would the president and his administration, of all people, not want to know how and why 9/11 happened so as to make sure it could never happen again? Why? Why did they not want to investigate? You would think of all people in the world, the president of all people would want to know, how the hell did this happen? I want to make sure it never happens again. Yet, according to the families and according to documentation, the administration was the biggest adversary against an investigation. And I'm going to talk about some of the things they did with regards to the investigation. In December 21st, 2001, senators introduced a bill to create an independent 9/11 commission. And at the time, the administration was saying, well, we look forward to reviewing them right now, but right now the president is focused on the war on terror. He doesn't want to take resources away from the war on terror to focus on an investigation. January of 2002, and this is one of the facts that really stood out to me when I first started to go down the rabbit hole. Bush and Cheney asked Tom Daschle to limit the scope of the congressional inquiry. He asked him to, depending upon who you talk to, he may have asked them, or they may have asked him not to investigate the attacks at all. I don't know that that's true, so they asked him to limit the scope of the congressional inquiry. In May 2002, Bush opposed a special inquiry into the terrorism warnings. It says, President Bush says he is opposed to establishing a special independent commission to probe how the government dealt with terrorism warnings before 9/11. September 5th, 2002, a senator decrees the lack of government cooperation in the 9/11 congressional inquiry. Richard Shelby of Alabama, the ranking Republican of the Senate Intelligence Committee, expresses doubts that the committee's 9/11 congressional inquiry will be able to accomplish anything, and he supports an independent investigation. Quote, time is not on our side, he says. Since the investigation has a built-in deadline at the end of 2002, quote, we were told that there would be cooperation in this investigation, and I question that. I think that most of the information that our staff has been able to get that is real meaningful has had to be extracted piece by piece. He adds that there is explosive information that has not been publicly released. Quote, I think there are some more bombs out there. I know that. September 18th, 2002, the first 9/11 inquiry hearing amidst protests about lack of government cooperation. It says, according to the Washington Post, lawmakers from both parties protest the Bush administration's lack of cooperation in the congressional inquiry into September 11th intelligence failures and threaten to renew efforts to establish an independent commission under presidential directive. If they established the 9/11 commission under the presidential directive, they would have had full control. They did anyway, but they would have had full control. According to CIA Director George Tenet, the president's knowledge of intelligence information relevant to this inquiry remains classified even when the substance of that intelligence information has been declassified. That's according to Eleanor Hill. It says, she adds that the American public has a compelling interest in this information and that public disclosure would not harm national security. One second. Okay. It says, Tenet has declined to declassify the information we developed about this person who may have been involved on the grounds that it could compromise intelligence sources and methods, and that this consideration supersedes the American public's interest in this particular area. Jeez. An FBI spokesman says the FBI had offered full cooperation to the committee. A CIA official denied that the report is damning. Quote, the committee acknowledges the hard work done by the Intelligence Committee, the successes it achieved. Sorry. September 20th, 2002, Bush changes course and backs the 9/11 Commission, whereas he didn't before. In the wake of damaging congressional 9/11 inquiry revelations, President Bush reverses course and backs efforts by many lawmakers to form an independent commission to conduct a broader investigation than the current congressional inquiry. But, as one of the 9/11 victims' relatives says, it's carefully crafted to make it look like a general endorsement, but it actually says that the commission would look at everything except the intelligence failures. Rather than look into such failures, Bush wants the commission to focus on areas like border security, visa issues, and the role of Congress in overseeing intelligence agencies. The White House also refuses to turn over documents showing what Bush knew before 9/11. That was in September of 2002. October 2002, Bush backtracks on support for an independent 9/11 investigation. A tentative congressional deal to create an independent commission to investigate the 9/11 attacks falls apart hours after the White House objected to the plan. It appears that Vice President Dick Cheney called Republican leaders and told them to renege on the agreement. Bush had pledged to support such a commission a few weeks earlier, but doubters who questioned his sincerity appear to have been proven correct. Hours after top Republican leaders announced at a press conference that an agreement had been reached, House Republican leaders said that they wouldn't bring the legislation to the full House for a vote unless the commission proposal was changed. There are worries that if the White House can delay the legislation for a few days until Congress adjourns, it could stop the creation of a commission for months, if not permanently. Another deal is made a few weeks later, and the commission goes forward. November 2002, Congress starts the new 9/11 investigation. Congress approves legislation creating an independent commission, the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States, to, quote, examine and report the facts and causes related to the September 11 terrorist attacks and to make a full and complete accounting of the circumstances surrounding the attacks. President Bush signs it into law on November 27, 2002, and the Democrats had to concede several important aspects of the commission, such as subpoena approval, after the White House threatens to create a commission by executive order over which it would have more control. Bush will appoint the commission chairman, and he sets a strict time frame, 18 months, for the investigation. The commission will only have a $3 million budget. Senator Jon Gold and others wonder how the commission can accomplish much with such a small budget. March 26, 2003, Bush turns down increased budget for the 9/11 Commission. Time reports that the 9/11 Commission has requested an additional $11 million to add to the $3 million for the commission, and the Bush administration has turned down the request. The request will not be added to the supplemental spending bill. A Republican member of the commission says the decision will make it, quote, look like they have something to hide. Another commissioner notes that the recent commission on the Columbia shuttle crash will have a $50 million budget. Stephen Push, a leader of the 9/11 victims' family, says that the decision, quote, suggests to me that they see this as a convenient way for allowing the commission to fail. They've never wanted the commission, and I feel the White House has always been looking for a way to kill it without having their finger on the murder weapon, end quote. The administration has suggested it may grant the money later, but any delay will further slow down the commission's work. Already, commission members are complaining that scant progress has been made in the 4 months since the commission started, and they are operating under a deadline. 3 days later, it is reported that the Bush administration has agreed to extra funding, but only $9 million, not the $11 million. The commission agrees to the reduced amount. The New York Times criticizes such penny pinching, saying, quote, reasonable people might wonder if the White House, having failed in its initial attempt to have Henry Kissinger steer the commission, may be resorting to budgetary starvation as a tactic to hobble any politically fearless inquiry. November 12, 2003, the 9/11 Commission and the White House agree to terms of access. Senators of both parties have been accusing the White House of stonewalling the 9/11 Commission by blocking its demands for documents despite threats of subpoena. On this day, the White House and the 9/11 Commission strike a deal. The main issue is access to the presidential daily briefings given to President Bush. Under the deal, only some of the 10 commissioners will be allowed to examine classified intelligence documents, and their notes will be subject to White House review. Some 9/11 victims' relatives complain that the agreement gives the White House too much power. The Family Steering Committee complains, quote, all 10 commissioners should have full, unfettered access and unrestricted access to all evidence. It urges the public release of the, quote, full, official, and final written agreement. Commissioner Max Cleland is unsatisfied with the deal and resigns a short time later. February 2004, Bush administration withholds Clinton documents from the 9/11 Commission. The Bush administration withholds thousands of documents from the Clinton administration that had already been cleared by Clinton's general counsel, Bruce Lindsay, for release to the 9/11 Commission. In April, after a public outcry, the Bush administration grants access to most of the documents. However, they continue to withhold approximately 57 documents. According to the Commission, the documents being withheld by the Bush White House include reference to al-Qaeda, bin Laden, and other issues relevant to the panel's work. Now, this is a very long entry, so I'm just going to do this from memory. Does everybody remember when Condoleezza Rice, when the White House refused to allow Condoleezza Rice to testify publicly? And instead, they sent Richard Armitage to testify in her place. And in protest, the family members got up out of the 9/11 Commission hearings and walked out. And I think it was very soon afterwards that Condoleezza Rice originally agreed to testify publicly. And, you know, she perjured herself a lot. You know, she wouldn't answer any question. She spun it to the best of her ability. And, you know, as Bob McIlvaine was talking about, people went up to her afterwards and were shaking her hand and just for coming out, and that was horrible. In April 29th, 2004, Bush and Cheney privately meet with the 9/11 Commission. They declined to provide testimony under oath. President Bush and Vice President Cheney appear for 3 hours of private questioning before the 9/11 Commission. Former President Clinton and former Vice President Al Gore met privately and separately with the Commission earlier in the month. The Commission permits Bush and Cheney to appear together in private and not under oath. The testimony is not recorded. Commissioners can take notes, but the notes are censored by the White House. The Commission drew most of their questions from a list submitted to the White House before the interview, but few details about the questions or the answers given are available. Two commissioners, Lee Hamilton and Bob Kerrey, leave the session early for other engagements. I guess they had other things to do. They claim they had not expected the interview to last more than previously agreed upon 2-hour length. And in July 22nd, 2004, the 9/11 Commission's final report is released, and the conclusions are gentle on the Bush administration. There are some things that are not in my list that I realized as I was sitting over there. This administration first wanted to put Henry Kissinger, a man who has warrants out for arrest around the world, in charge of this investigation. After the families questioned him about his business dealings, whether or not they had any bin Laden clients, he stepped down, and then Tom Keene was put in place, and Lee Hamilton. I found out recently Lee Hamilton is very good friends with Dick Cheney and very good friends with Donald Rumsfeld. He was also head of the Iran-Contra Committee, who investigated those dealings, and said that at the time of the Iran-Contra that they didn't want to hold anybody accountable because it would be bad for the country, very similar to what he said with regards to the 9/11 attacks. And then they appointed Philip Zelikow as the executive director of the 9/11 Commission. Philip Zelikow was in charge of every aspect of that commission. He was in charge of the staffers. He was in charge of where the investigation would go, who they would interview, what would be included in the report. Phil Sheenan recently wrote a book called The Commission, which talks about how he tried to put in ties into the 9/11 report, tying Iraq to the 9/11 attacks, even though it was completely bogus and the staffers pressured for that not to happen. It also talked about how he may have had dealings with Karl Rove at the time of the 9/11 Commission. We all know who Karl Rove is. Philip Zelikow helped to write the Iraq War Strategy. He was part of the Bush transition team. He was friends with Condoleezza Rice, and he wrote a book with her. And this is not a man, this is somebody the families called for the resignation of at the time of the 9/11 Commission, and they were ignored. And this is the man who was in charge of this. To me, the news about Karl Rove and Philip Zelikow completely discredits the entire 9/11 Commission, completely discredits it. You know, they talk about subpoena power. They rarely ever, I think 2 times, who knows how many times they used their subpoena power? Anyone? I think they used it twice, and the families fought for it. And in recent months, we found out about the CIA interrogation tapes, how they were destroyed. During the time of the 9/11 Commission, they used what were called signing statements. These signing statements would be delivered, and they could be ignored, whereas a subpoena could not be ignored. And Philip Zelikow, at the time the news came out about the destroyed interrogation tape, said, we asked for him with these signing statements. Well, you know what? You should have subpoenaed for him, Phil. You know, every chapter of the 9/11 report was vetted by the White House. You know, the White House, just to, the commissioners themselves said that they were set up to fail by the Bush administration. In their book, Without Precedent, they said that they were set up to fail. And it's, okay, Thomas Keene and Lee Hamilton, the former chairman and vice chairman of the 9/11 Commission, released a book giving a behind-the-scenes look at their 20-month investigation of the September 11th attacks. They begin their book, titled Without Precedent, saying that because their investigation started late, had a very short time frame, and had inadequate funding, they both felt from the beginning that they were, quote, set up to fail. They explained the difficulties they faced in obtaining certain government documents and described how the commission almost splintered over whether to investigate the Bush administration's use of 9/11 as a reason for going to war. It says that if original member Max Cleland, a strong proponent of this line of inquiry, had not resigned, the commission probably would have reached unanimity. It also calls their gentle questioning of former New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani during his May 2004 testimony, quote, a low point in the commission's handling of the witnesses at its public hearings. In the beginning, people were not sworn under oath. The families had to fight so that everybody would be sworn under oath. Despite the problems it faced when discussing his book with the CBC, Hamilton says he thinks the commission has been, quote, reasonably successful in telling the story. They weren't hired to tell a story. They were hired to give a full and complete accounting of the 9/11 attacks, and they failed miserably. In September 25th, 2006, a 9/11 commissioner reveals a secret deal to keep Bush and Clinton testimony secret until 2009. The 9/11 Commission interviewed Presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush in 2004, but the details of what was revealed in these interviews were not included in the Commission's final report, with one exception, the August 6, 2000 PDB. On this day, former 9/11 Commissioner Richard Benveniste says, quote, I had hoped that we would have made both the Clinton interview and the Bush interview a part of our report, but that was not to be. I was outvoted on that question. I didn't have the votes. I think the question was there, that there was a degree of confidentiality associated with that, and that we would take from that the output that is reflected in the report, but go no further, and that until some 5 years' time after our work, we would keep that confidential. I thought we would be better to make all of the information that we had available to the public and make our report as transparent as possible so the American public could have that. I asked you to remember the anger, and that anger that we feel, the frustration and the anguish that we feel is nothing compared to what people like Bob McIlvaine, Michelle Little, and the 2,973 other families that were affected by those that were murdered that day. So, please try to keep that in perspective. When you're talking to people, do your very best. You're speaking for the 2,973 people that were murdered on that day because they no longer can. So please, when you're going around and talking to people, try to do the best that you possibly can. People ask me all the time, why do I support the family members? Because I can't possibly imagine the pain that they feel, and they deserve better. They deserve better. I also support the NYC ballot initiative. Right now I'm trying to contact celebrities to try and get some funding so that we could pay people to go get the signatures that we need. Because the volunteers, we can't get enough volunteers. If anybody here wants to volunteer, if you're from New York, please do. But, we're trying to do what we can, because if you give the people the decision to open up a new investigation, I can almost guarantee that that will happen. Whereas if we leave it in the hands of the powers that be, it will never happen. I want to say thank you to Justin, Martell, Michael Jackman, Eric Jackman, everybody who is responsible for bringing this together. This is extremely important, and thank you all for coming out today. That's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you very much.